Welcome, everyone. As you hop into Zoom, feel free to scan the QR code and let us know where you're joining from today. You can put your state, your academic center, your health center system, whatever you prefer, just so we can see where everybody's joining from. For those of you just hopping in, feel free to scan the QR code and tell us where you're coming from. For those of you just joining, feel free to scan the QR code and let us know where you're coming from today. We'll give it just another minute or two to give folks a chance to hop on. So cool to see so many different sites represented across the United States and Puerto Rico.
They were trying to kick the protesters off a couple days ago, but it didn't go as planned. I don't know about like the.
All right. Well, looking here, we can see we've got folks from Rhode Island, Mississippi, Maine, Kansas, Puerto Rico, Rhode Island, CTSI here at WVU, Hawaii. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. It is 2 minutes after 3, and we have a lot of important and good information to share with everybody, and then also a great panel discussion with some of our folks from here at WVU, and then also Maine Health. So I want to go ahead and get started, and we will continue to let people in as they join. All right, so without further ado, I just want to share a little bit of an agenda for today so you know what to expect over the next hour. The first portion of this is really geared towards the Clinical Research Coordinator Certificate enrollees, so those who are currently in the program or are thinking about joining the Clinical Research Coordinator Development Program. And then we're going to go right into our panel discussion. So I'll do some introductions here in a few moments. But we're going to get started with just talking a little bit about navigating success as a clinical research coordinator certificate enrollee. And then we'll finish up the hour with some questions from attendees and some open discussion with our panel.
So with that, I do have a couple just housekeeping items. For those that are attending today, all the panelists have been gracious enough to do a disclosure and submit a CE to our CE office here at WVU. We are able to offer one continuing education credit to those here at WVU and to our charter sites as well. So please feel free for attendance purposes, if you could put your name and your email in the chat box for us, we would greatly appreciate it. And then just indicate CE if you would like continuing education credit. Or, and I've already asked for those that are ACRP and SOCRA certified, we will share these slides and the sign-in sheet after today's session. So you can definitely submit those to those organizations for potential credit. Once again, just put ACRP or SOCRA next to your name and email, and that way I'll make sure we get those over to you. The other thing is we have Sarah Heyman. I don't think she introduced herself at the beginning. She's our assistant director, and she's doing we're kicking off our seminar series today with being an effective clinical research coordinator. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah.
All right, thanks, Debbie. So as I was mentioning, we're going to start today's program with really some tricks and tips for those enrolled in the certificate program. We want to make sure that they're getting the most out of the program that they can. And so these are just some things that we would like to make sure they think about as they progress through. So if you look on the slide here, you can see that some of the different components of the Clinical Research Coordinator Development Program. It includes our experiential learning, didactic learning, journal club, seminar series, which is what we're doing here today, and then some mentoring. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is the experiential learning. And I want to really make sure that we get across to the certificate enrollees that they do have some responsibilities that are particularly theirs. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about those on the next slide. Next thing I want to just say for the experiential learning piece is make sure that they're communicating with their preceptors, asking questions, just kind of opening that line of communication daily with them. For the didactic piece and the didactic learning, one thing we want to mention is even though it's a self-paced program, really think about staying on top of a schedule for yourself and not letting yourself get behind and saving that didactic portion for, the last week or so that you're in the program. Think about jumping around to align those with your experiential learning. So if you are talking with your preceptor and they mention that the next day you're going to be consenting a patient, you might go to the didactic portion around consenting patients and watch the videos that go along with that. For Journal Club, which that's going to start next week, I believe, we just ask that you be an active participant and join when you can. These are going to be once a month. So I think this is a good opportunity for some peer mentoring and collaboration across the state. For the seminar series, like we're doing today, so just really encouraging your attendance if it's possible. It's free professional development, and that's something that you don't always get in a program. So really take advantage of that if possible. And then for the mentoring piece, really just being proactive in meeting with your mentor. Your mentors and your preceptors both are going to be very busy individuals. So really taking that initiative to reach out to them is important, and sharing your goals. So as I mentioned, I want to talk a little bit more about the experiential learning. There are some certificate enrollee responsibilities that we want you to think about from the start of the program. First thing I would mention is really become familiar with that checklist. This is shared with the certificate enrollees as soon as they attend the orientation at the beginning of the program. And then it's also available for them to get on the SOL platform. But really just become familiar with it and look at the different sections of the checklist and things that you're going to have to, observe with your preceptor and then eventually demonstrate. Next thing, I would suggest that you keep this checklist with you all the time. Have it, have a clipboard or a notebook, whatever it might be, and make sure you have it with you as when you're on site. And this will really help for you to communicate with your preceptor. If you are, know you're going to be observing one of these activities on here, whether it's, a conflict of interest or consenting a patient, immediately ask your preceptor to sign off and make sure that you have that with you all the time. So that would be very helpful. If you leave it up to your preceptor, again, these are really, really busy individuals, and we don't want that responsibility to fall on them. And then finally, the last thing we ask is that you upload this in SOL once it's been completed. On the flip side, there are a few responsibilities for the preceptors. Really make sure you provide those opportunities for observation and demonstration. If you know that there's something on the checklist that you're going to be doing and your enrollee is not right there with you, maybe grab them and have them come over so they can observe or demonstrate, whichever it may be. And then provide immediate feedback if you can while you're standing there with your certificate enrollee. And then finally, just signing off on that checklist. But again, really the responsibility is on the certificate enrollee to have this with them and be proactive in asking their preceptor for these signatures. All right. For the didactic learning, again, once you have gone through the orientation, you will be given access to SOL. You'll get an email from Debbie Lee and to make sure that you've gotten access. Once you get that email, try to log in and make sure it works for you. If not, make sure you reach out to Debbie to get anything straightened out so you're able to access it. The next thing I would suggest is become familiar with the modules. As I've mentioned before, aligning with the experiential learning will be really helpful. So if you're familiar with the modules and the topics that are going to be discussed throughout the didactics, this will be a big help so that you can align that with the experiential learning. And then make sure you complete all the modules and ensure successful upload of all assignments. If something bounces back or you get an email from Debbie, that's probably saying that she hasn't received something. So just make sure that things are uploading so you get credit for everything. And then again, try not to wait until the last minute. This is something you should really work through throughout the duration of the program. Any questions before we move on? All right. So the part that we're really excited about today is we have a panelist or a group of panelists with us today who will talk about some questions that we're going to go through about being an effective clinical research coordinator, provide us some of their experiences as they've gone through their careers, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. So without further ado, I want to get started with some introductions. Deborah Burris, who we have from Maine Health, is a float pool lead clinical research nurse coordinator at the Maine Health Institute of Research in Portland, Maine. Deborah began her career in research in the 1980s at an independent research clinic as a per diem phlebotomist, collecting laboratory samples and inserting angiocaps for serial pharmacokinetic sampling. As trials and demands increased, the clinical trial unit opened at Maine Medical Center, and Deborah established and coordinated the clinical research lab. Currently, Deborah coordinates multiple trials in various disciplines and settings, including drug and device trials. Some of these drug trials have gone to market, including Chantix and Invokana. She has also worked on cutting-edge clinical research trials, including COVID treatment during the pandemic. Deborah assisted in the early access program that allows patients to access pre-approved access to drugs outside of a trial. Deborah earned her research coordinator certificate through the Association of Clinical Research Professionals in 2003. She earned a degree in nursing at Southern Maine Community College in 2011. Deborah co-authored and co-authored 15 published articles over her career. Next up, we have Chad Blaze, who's in the room with us here. Chad grew up in the Panhandle of West Virginia and moved to Morgantown and attended WVU, where he graduated with an undergraduate degree in business administration and a master's in integrated marketing communications. His research journey started at the Heart and Vascular Institute as a research assistant, where he transitioned into a project coordinator, then manager. He's currently the Assistant Director of Clinical Research at WVCTSI, and he's been involved in clinical research for 7 years. Fun fact about Chad is he loves music and often goes to concerts and festivals. He collects vinyl records, and it says you have over 100 collected.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's correct.
all genres.
Yep, everything.
All right, next we have Ann Schnatterly. Ann has been involved in clinical research for over 20 years. While pursuing her nursing degree at Case Western Reserve University, she was introduced to the world of research as a data coordinator for a public health study of infant pulmonary hemosiderosis, I think I said that right, and black mold. After a few years working in the organ transplant program, she returned to pediatrics as a cystic fibrosis research nurse. Ann began her career in cancer research at University Hospitals of Cleveland, Seidman Cancer Center in 2000, concentrating in lung cancer and HIV malignancies, including the opportunity to work with international sites in Africa. Eventually, Ann progressed into a management track and oversaw clinical and financial operations, including a regional network and phase 1 developmental therapeutics program. Ann jumped at the opportunity to move back to the mountains and family in Western Maryland in 2014. She has greatly enjoyed working with the various research professionals on campus and bringing clinical research opportunities to patients and clinicians across the state. And then finally, we have Shelley Welch. Shelley is the director of the Clinical Trials Center of Excellence, where she has oversight for the operational team to execute clinical trials. She has over 20 years of experience in the research industry, 6 years with WVCTSI, and 11 years with a local contract research organization leading clinical research teams. Fun fact about Shelley, her favorite vacation was to Alaska in 2019. So thank you to our panelists for joining us today. And I think we'll go ahead and get started. So for my first question, I want to ask, this could go to either Chad or Shelley. I'd like to know a little bit more about your career paths. Could you tell us how you got here? And did you think you'd be doing something else?
Yeah, so I can take this one. So yeah, I actually went to school for business administration. When I graduated, I thought I was going to be in pharmaceutical sales. That did not happen. I ended up becoming a research assistant at the WVU Heart and Vascular Institute, where I actually got to shadow everyone from regulatory to business to the study coordinators. And then I was able to quickly move up there as they were developing their program. I did not expect this field, never really liked the clinical side of things, but 7 years later, here I am.
That's great, Chad. Thank you. Shelley, did you want to add anything?
I can tell you about my experience getting into clinical research. I'm a nurse by background, and so I had 2 major jobs, one acute care when I coming right out of nursing school, and then about 15 years in home health. And that was in the 80s, and where home health was exploding. And then Medicare got the idea that treating people in the home wasn't such a good thing. And I had to lay off my staff. I was a director at the time, lay off my staff twice. And let me tell you, when you have to riff people, it's no fun. And I got tired of that after the second round, and I was like, I want to do something else. And so an opportunity came up in cardiology at WVU. It wasn't called the Heart and Vascular Institute. It was just cardiology. And I had a friend that had the position, and she was like, I think you should try this. And so, having no research experience whatsoever, came to WVU and learned from a great boss, also a nurse in cardiology, and stayed there, for 3 years, and then got attracted to pharma, if you will. Was there for 10, and then now came back and have been with CTSI. So it was for nursing. For me, when I was in nursing school, and certainly in my nursing career in home health and acute care, you don't think about research at all. I didn't anyway, back then. It was not one of those classes that you took. It was, I think now it's changed, but back then it was a industry that I knew nothing about until, I got exposed to it from my colleague.
Great, thank you, Shelley.
Mhm.
Deb and Ann, we learned a little bit about your career pathway through the bio that we went through, but can you tell us anything more about how you got here, and did you think this is the career that you would have?
So for myself, this is Deb. I really took the long road. I started in the kitchen when I was 16 and went to phlebotomy. And I was fortunate enough, somebody had come in and put a sign up saying they needed blood draws for research patients. And at that time, the research trials were not even conducted in the hospital or a clinic. And so I volunteered and I loved it. And still, I didn't really get into it. And I ended up going to many different departments, everywhere from endocrine to histology to anesthesiology. But every time I got into one of those departments, something in that department drew me back to research. And very much what Shelley said, it wasn't out there that research was even available. You just kind of, I don't know, I guess sought it out on some degree. So I was able to keep finding work, and finally our work had stopped. We didn't have another trial, and my director at that time wanted to kind of farm me out. So she put out a email to the hospital to say, does anybody have research going on, and do you need any help? And that's where I started. And now here I am 25 years later.
Yeah, it kind of gets in your blood and you can't get away from it.
That's what I hear. That's kind of the trending thing I hear across the.
Yes, yeah. I'll get so I kind of I fell into it, honestly, like everyone else did. I worked as a secretary in a pediatric pulmonary office at Rainbow in Cleveland while I was in nursing school. And I will say something that you've never ever heard a nurse say is that when I graduated nursing school, they were laying nurses off. So we actually for several months I did not have a job, and they were the hospital had sponsored us for our education, so they had a contract to try and employ us within like 6 months or so. So in the interim, the pulmonary office asked if I wanted to design an access database and work with the public health department. And I was just, well, sure, I'll do that. And that's something that at least filled up my time and kept me clinically involved. I did have to go fulfill my contract and go back into the floor and work on the floor in the inpatient setting. But they, a couple of years after that same pediatric pulmonary department said, we loved having you in that database. We, did some great work with the public health department. They did have research nurses when I was the secretary there. They're like, we'd like for you to come back and be a research nurse with us. So that's where, I was a pediatric concentrated nurse. So I, got into cystic fibrosis research for a couple of years. Then my colleague jumped over to the Cancer Institute, and I followed her over there about a year later, not really having much of an oncology background, just having really kind of those research, the last couple of years of research. We all became SOCRA certified. So, I kind of decided this was going to be my career path. But really every opportunity I've had was just sort of being at the right time, at the right place, in terms of, I wanted to learn finance. We needed someone to do budgets. We wanted, someone to learn how to design a database. I just kind of kept volunteering, and that's one opportunity that you have in this field, is like, there's always something new, whether it's a new trial or whether it's a new department that wants to grow, whether there's a new disease setting, the world of oncology. What I saw, when I started in oncology research 20 years ago, I was able to see my, family members later on, receive those drugs and receive those treatments. So it's just something that it's always going to be changing, and it's always going to give you some self-fulfillment of working with these patients as well.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. It sounds like there are a lot of avenues and options with this career path.
Mhm.
So let's get into a little bit of the nitty gritty. Kind of, can you tell us a little bit about the average day of a clinical research coordinator? And maybe we'll start with Deb on this one.
Well, it's a little challenging to express it because in the float pool, we're not assigned to a specific discipline, type of trial. So the day can be anything from consenting patients, setting up patient binders, meeting with ancillary staff, scheduling patients for appointments. Could be meetings all day, could be trainings. So in the float pool, there's a lot of opportunity for it to be a lot of different things. So literally when you get up, you don't know what you're going to do.
Great, thanks, Deb. And Anne, anything you'd want to add on that? Or Shelley?
I was going to say, yeah, I think every job in research, you have to be flexible because your best laid plans, when you think you have a plan in the morning of what you're going to do, you might be able to do that, but you might not be able to do that as well. You might get into an hour of your day and, you know, something happens with a patient, something happens with the trial that you have to shift gears quickly. And so you'll have to be adaptive and flexible. To the max, in my experience.
Thanks,
I-
Shelley.
I think the other thing is that we spend a lot of time concentrating on the research coordinator. And, you know, for us, like in the Cancer Institute and some of the other some of the larger research departments, you know, we have a team of people behind our research coordinators. So we're a slightly different, some smaller groups. I know that research coordinator may be the person writing your consent forms and working on your budget and seeing your patients and having to juggle all of those hats. You know, in the cancer center, our research coordinators really are just responsible for the day-to-day clinical management, and then they have a data coordinator, and then they have a regulatory person, and they have a finance person that does their billing. So it's like they're a little bit more concentrated in their just in their job itself. But they have to work with that team, and they are, like, as I always say, like the tip of the iceberg. Like, you know, there's 5 people for every 1 research nurse of people that are supporting them that day. So when you're out there and recruiting patients as a research coordinator, it's that communication with your patient, it's that communication with your sponsor, it's that communication with your PI, it's that communication with your team, that I think people, you know, underestimate that volume of communication that you kind of have to work through your day as well.
Great, thank you. So I heard adaptive, flexible, communicate. With all of the different things that you're juggling, it sounds like organizational skills are probably very important. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the strategies you use to stay organized?
Yeah, for me, it's really, you know, keeping all of the studies straight. I'm involved in probably 40 different projects. So little tips, different mailboxes in my Outlook to be able to separate the studies. Sometimes by study coordinator, and also just a notebook that I really keep, you know, divided up by study, what's happening, what's going on. That's what works for me.
Thanks, Chad.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Deb, do you have any strategies, your go-tos, how you stay organized?
Really, I treat each trial as its own little business, so to speak, so it keeps them separate. There's so many similar things, but different things. It's really important, like you have, you know, a specific file for study ABC. We're fortunate we have a regulatory staff, so they keep that all clear for us. But in terms of, you know, protocols, consents, patients, I just handle them differently as a little company of their own.
I like that.
I would, Sarah, if I can interject too, I think that the Outlook and, tools that you can use yourself, but I also think that using institutional tools such as a clinical trial management system is key as well. They, especially when you're involved if in multiple studies, I think that the tracking of the subjects, tracking of their AEs, tracking of of the deviations of the protocol. If you have a clinical trial management system, that would help as well.
And I'll add that, I didn't have some of those resources before, and really that transition into having it, it's amazing. I mean, it helps keep everything organized. I will also add, the correct versions of consents is very important, and a system like that can keep those organized for you.
Anne, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, CTMS is dear to my heart, Shelley knows, so I was definitely gonna advocate
I stole it from you, Anne.
a robust adaptability of your CTMS. I mean, they're
Yes.
and Epic. I mean, I don't want to
that's true,
diminish
Epic.
Epic, and I know that some of my research coordinators are on this, that and they've all created great ways to track their patients and have their notes to themselves if they're following patients and waiting for them to relapse in their disease or something else to happen, that they can keep their internal notes within Epic, and just maximizing everything that you have on the electronic side is key.
Mhm.
Thank you. We touched a little bit about communication on the last question, but I want to bring it up again and really just see if you could tell us a little bit about why communication is so important. And in particular for you, Chad, how did you find effective ways, being that you didn't come from a clinical background, how did you find effective ways to communicate with physicians and fellows and those in the medical field?
It was very difficult at first, new to the clinical setting, a research assistant, communicating with all these physicians. Really, I view it as a different kind of communication and research than maybe someone has on the floor as a nurse. And I can let Shelley speak to that. But I feel like they want to do the project. They're energized by it. So I'm able to sit down in their office and have those honest conversations with them. I think also I learned from my colleagues. I learned from the research coordinators. I learned from administration on how to have those conversations. And it went well. You learn how to adjust. It's different communication style for everyone. So you just learn to adjust in the moment.
Great, thank you.
I think, if I can interject, I think that, when talking to the physician, they are obviously, the clinical expert of the disease that, you're treating. But the study coordinator in many aspects is the protocol expert. The PI, in my experience, relies on the study coordinator to really understand and know that protocol inside and out. And if they don't know it inside and out, they've got to know where to get the answers. And that's also very key, is you may not know all the answers. You're probably not going to. I don't know all the answers. Nobody does. But you got to know who to go to at the sponsor level. And that's really important, because if you're in the middle of a cath lab and the procedure is going wrong and you've got a study patient, you've got to know how to get a hold of that CRA to help guide the care of that patient within the protocol. And so I think that communication and that expectation, knowing that expectation of being the protocol expert while you're not the disease expert, is really helpful.
And it's okay to say, I'll get back to you. I'm
Yeah,
going to
I
find
don't know. Yeah.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to add also that communication piece is huge with your participants. More and more, we're dealing with standard of care. Some things they may go right over your head. You really count on your participant to keep you up to date on what's going on in their own care, to, whether they're keeping diaries, all of those things are really important to have communication with your participants, because often they are a huge piece of the information that you're collecting. So they must understand what it is you're asking.
Very true, very true.
Thank you, Deb. I think you bring up a good point that communication is one, speaking, but then also the flip side of listening. So I think you bring that up and really engaging with the patient. All right, so moving on to the next one, what are some pitfalls that you've encountered and how did you navigate those? And I'll give you a minute, maybe if you need to think about it, but if you can think of any specific examples or pitfalls that maybe you've encountered anytime in your career. Anne, can I put you on the spot?
One, like pitfalls, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're talking about there's, you know, there are a lot of clinical trials in the cancer world that just end up not going as far as you were hoping that they would go. So I think, you know, it's, as a coordinator, I think kind of the stressors, the kind of things that help that we can get burned out from is that you are continually kind of approaching these patients about volunteering, whether it's a phase 1 study or a phase 3 trial, to take part on this and be exposed to a potential new type of treatment. And then it doesn't work. And then you're talking to this patient about the next trial, and you're talking about the next trial. And, you know, it's nice that we have that ability to keep offering trials, and these patients are volunteering, and you're always needing to support those patients and make sure everything is safe. But I mean, I think there's a lot of burnout with like when these trials just don't seem to be working for your patients. And, you know, the just that faith and that trust that you have with those patients to kind of keep them on, it can be a challenge, I think, for some of us.
That's a good perspective, Anne. I mean, in the non-cancer world, you know, we don't necessarily have that, but that is super important.
Do you have anything to add?
No. I think, you know, everyone's right on with that. No.
I could tell you one experience, how many years ago? Gosh, 20 years ago. You say a pitfall, so it was a mistake, not necessarily a mistake that I made, but that brought back if I had a CTMS at the time, the mistake wouldn't have been made. So, you know, in the cath lab, we used to keep consents of all the studies, and we had a fellow consent a patient that was having an MI. They consented on the wrong consent, and it was a major problem. I wasn't there. You know, it was in the middle of the night. So having a CTMS, as Chad mentioned, is very, very important. Use those resources.
So then after that happened, I mean, what was kind of the next step, Shelley?
Oh, that patient withdrew. They were very upset. I had to meet with them, and withdrew them from the study. Major deviation. Reported to the IRB, reported to the sponsor, probably reported to legal because they were really upset. As they should have been.
You know, to follow up on that, Shelley, also, one of the remedies that we now use is we don't allow informed consents to be floating around. We used to have a practice of everybody just, you know, you didn't know when a patient was going to come, so you photocopied it. So everybody, but, you know, we go back to communication where not everybody knew that there was a new version. Not everybody knew. So now we have implemented a process that you have to pull it right off IRB net.
Mm-hmm.
And it eliminates that worry of the photocopied consents, because we've all been bit by that,
Mm-hmm.
that they've used the wrong one.
Yep.
So just to expand on that a little bit.
Thank goodness we've evolved.
Yes.
Yeah. I also think one of the things that's kind of tough to adjust to is like what we are always told what we're not doing right as coordinators. If it's your monitors coming, they're writing up to you like, yeah, you didn't cross your line, or the infusion nurse didn't put in the right time, and it wasn't you, but you have to correct it. You're all, the IRB and reviews will always come back to you with comments. Your really the monitors, audits, your data people, like it's never ending list of you needing to clarify data or you needing to go back and correct things. And, it's not going to be 100% correct the first time you put it in there. You're dealing with living human people. Things are going to change that you cannot control all the time. There's going to be deviations. There's never going to be that perfect study with perfect data and no deviations and no that. But it's hard when you're always like continuously having these monitors coming in and writing up all the things that they think that you may have done wrong, and having to respond to that. So I think that's also an adjustment that you might not have if you're just in the basic clinical environment all the time.
Yeah, and I'll also add back to the consents, if you have to, have those consents printed out, I always recommend number the packets, know exactly where those consents are and who has them. So when there is a new amendment and there's a change, you know exactly where they're located at, how many you have out, and where to replace them at.
Thank you, Chad. All right, I think we have time for just a couple more questions before we open it up. So what are some career options for those who've served as a CRC in an academic setting and then also industry? So can you speak a little bit about the career options that are possible? And Shelley, we'll start with you.
So industry, gosh, any of you don't leave from WVU. So everybody close, that's on from WVU, that's on my team. Close your ears, because industry will scoop anybody up from that has study coordination. And if you're a study coordinator with a nursing degree, you're like, from my experience, very cream of the crop, if you will. It's a different lifestyle, for sure. CRAs certainly, maybe their travel is less, but they're road warriors for sure. And you have to, travel a lot. So any pharma company, CRA, project management, if you like the travel and like that lifestyle, it's definitely a different lifestyle, very high pressure, that sometimes trickles down to us, to enroll patients and to, get the, protocol up and running quickly, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody knows that, but the sky's the limit as far as pharmaceutical companies and CROs. So, for CRAs or project management, data managers, things of that nature.
Thanks, Shelley.
Mm-hmm.
Another position I've seen evolve a bit is navigators. So that's within the hospital, and usually they're kind of embedded in a specific department. But I see that position really growing more than I had ever seen as well.
I think there's also opportunity, and if you like the IT side, in terms of like if you have Epic or whatever your EMR may be, there's a lot of research activity that can be for someone who wants to be more on the health informatics side. There's people that you can, so my work, in Cleveland was cancer, but tied to the HIV community and then tied to projects in Africa. There's some people I know at the Eye Institute that had some projects that were, I think, down in South America or the islands down south of us. So you can, also form relationships with other academic institutions across the world, and really have some, if that's something that you're interested in, international healthcare and medicine, then, that's also another area that might be open for you. And
just adding to what Shelley said, I have friends in industry, and it's a different world. I mean, you know, it's fast paced, it's a lot of travel, and some people love it, and that's where some people thrive at. So, you know, it's a very interesting journey to industry.
Mhm.
Thank you. All right, and so we're going to close with this one final question. So outside of I2C, what are some outside professional networks or resources that you use really to stay current in the field? And so we'll start with Deb.
I would say ACRP, SOCRA, whether you are certified or not, there's a lot of information there. Our own research institute, the Maine Health Research Institute, the IRBs, sponsors, in-services, grand rounds, colleagues. There's really, you can find something that relates to research in any field if you choose to look. But I think these like ACRP, SOCRC, I mean, they have some specific information that lets you know what's going on outside of your bubble. And you can really see what's going on and hear what's going on and what's of interest. You know, I know that we're going to have a journal club, and one of the things I think I will suggest to the enrollees is to, you know, check on ACRP, SOCRA, see what's new, what's coming, and do a little research about it.
Great, thanks, Deb. Anne, anything to add?
That covers most of what I was going to say too. I think SOCRA and ACRP are great organizations to kind of get some information. The cancer side, there's some AACI has a clinical research innovation group. If your institution is an AACI member, it's a great national committee. They have listservs that are phenomenally robust. And I mean, I think that's reaching out to a colleague at like a site, like meeting them at, like, if we used to be in person at site initiation visits, Shelley probably maybe mirrors the day, or Deb does, where they, you know, used to fly us to San Francisco for a meeting for 2 days. Yeah.
Those days are gone.
Those days are gone. But you know, that was such great networking, just to meet another research coordinator in your disease area at a different institution. I mean, we would just pick each other's brains about everything, you know, when we would get together at those meetings. So I think not being afraid, if you go to any conferences, of just putting yourself at that table and talking to people what they do and asking questions. You know, we've all been there. We've all had the same question asked of us if we haven't asked it. So I think that's just one thing just to keep in mind.
That's great. Thanks, Anne. Chad, coming from, you know, without a clinical background, have there been any other resources that you can think of that were particularly helpful?
Really, it's just knowing, you know, from the institution, like where I can go for those resources, who I can ask those questions to, whether it's physicians having those conversations, or, you know, mentors, or just teammates. I mean, that's how I learned a lot of it. Was I kind of attached myself to a coordinator, and I went with them everywhere, and I learned the process, talked to the physicians, and really grew from that.
Thank you. All right, well, that concludes the questions that I have, but I want to open it up to the audience for questions for Anne, Deb, Shelley, and Chad. So feel free to unmute yourself, or you can throw this in the chat box if you prefer. If you have
This is Karen. I do have just a comment to make that.
Sure.
I started with my clinical trials over at another facility, and I was the only person in the department. So I did regulatory, I did everything from starting the trial to ending the trial, and you were just a department of one that I worked with. And coming over here, this was totally different for me, that, oh, you've got somebody that can do regulatory for you, take things to the IRB and that kind of stuff. But also at the other facility, if, like when Shelley was talking about the consent that had been on the wrong version, if I had done that, I would have been written up, gotten a CAPA in my HR file, and that was just the you know, how it was done by the manager that I had. So coming over here, and if you make a mistake, it's not, but I'm not scared to go tell somebody because
Good.
it's a training, it's a learning experience, and then I can update other coordinators and say, hey, this is what happened to me. Just be sure to watch this when you're doing that. And it's more of a learning process over here than being punished, I guess. And I certainly appreciate that a lot. Just having other people to go to and say, read this part of the protocol. What do you think that says? How are you taking that? Is helpful to be able to do too.
Thanks, Karen.
Teamwork is helpful.
I'll jump in if there's not another question, while people think about it, but I know that you guys mentioned, inevitably there's going to be a protocol deviation or something that comes up that could have been handled differently. What would be your advice to people early in their career about how to repair those relationships or build back trust? Whether it's with the PI, your colleague, the sponsor, what are some things that you wish that you guys supervise people? What do you tell them on how to build back that trust and repair relationships when mishaps inevitably happen?
I mean, I think it's being honest and open and discussing and being collaborative on how you fix it. I mean, we all make mistakes. It's not in making the mistakes. It's how you fix the issue or the mistake, if you will, that I think is really important.
Well, I just keep moving forward. Don't take anything personal. Mistakes will be made and you move forward.
Yeah, honesty, it is, and it's hard. And when our new staff come to us and, they're all distraught and like, I really messed up. My first questions are like, are they still alive? Like, did you kill anyone? And they kind of look at me and they're like, no. I'm like, okay, well then everything else we can deal with. Yeah. Now, there's been a few times in my career when they're like, well, I'm not dead yet. We'll kind of got to go back through that. But 98% of the time, you're going to make these mistakes, and you just have to come up with a plan. And I will tell you, 98% of the time, if you make that mistake and come up with a plan and do that, you'll never make that mistake again. So it's definitely something that you learn. You'll never do that one twice. But it's the honesty. You just have to be upfront and timely. Don't try and hide it. Don't try and bury it in paperwork. Just say, this is what happened and we need to fix it.
Great advice. Any other questions or comments? I know I see Kim sharing some resources in the chat box from Vermont, so take a look at those. We've got 65 people. I know you're not all this quiet.
Sarah, do you want to spend a minute? I know, as you mentioned, there's 65 people on the call and we have, about 30 active certificate members. Do you want to give them a little information about if they're not currently involved with I-SCORE-RC, as a certificate enrollee or a preceptor or mentor, who they can reach out to?
Sure.
About that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, we only have, I say at this point, a little over 20 in the certificate program and approximately the same number of preceptors. So, good point, Megan. There are probably some on the call who are not involved yet. If you're interested in being a preceptor, if you're at a site that is part of the I-SCORE-RC, there is an application form you can fill out, and this would be to work with a clinical research coordinator certificate enrollee. And so essentially they would be with you as they go through the competency checklist that I spoke about earlier and really learn the skills of a CRC. So that's one way you could get involved. If you are new to clinical research coordination within the first year of your employment, or if you are interested in becoming a clinical research coordinator, you would be somebody who could join the certificate program. And then again, there's an application process for that as well. And you would have to be able to identify a preceptor at your site or at a site where you're located or positioned. And then once you apply for that program, we have a committee that looks over the applications and lets you know if you're in the program or not. And then you will be privy to the didactic portion. You'll be set up with a preceptor so you can go through the competency checklist and gain the skills needed. Through that also, you'll be paired with a mentor to offer some career guidance. You'd be participating in the journal club. So there's a lot of things involved with being in the program in that capacity. I can share my screen again because I do have some other things to share. If I can get, oh, is it, yeah, it is sharing, okay. So some upcoming events. We do have our first journal club on May 15th. This is really going to be kind of an orientation to the journal club. So we're going to talk a little bit about, what to expect each month, talk about, some of the articles that you could choose the types of articles you could choose to present, but certificate enrollees are going to get the opportunity if they want to present a relevant article to clinical research coordination. And we'll meet once a month again then for these presentations. So the first one is May 15th. It's always on the third Wednesday of the month from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So no matter where you're at, that should hopefully fit into your day nicely. We also have a new cohort of mentor training that's going to start May 16th. So if you're interested in serving as a mentor for the program, I encourage you to come to the mentor training. This is going to happen over the course of 5 to 6 months. There are different sessions that will be offered. You do have the opportunity to earn a digital micro-credential in mentoring if you attend 5 of the topics that are involved in the training. We also have Clinical Trials Toolkit Series. We have a session on May 17th called Rapid Answers to Feasibility and Research through Trinetics and How to Training on REDCap. So this is going to be May 17th from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we also have another one scheduled for June 21st, Information Security and Clinical Trials. So if you're interested in attending any of these upcoming events, you can reach out to our program coordinator, Austin Anderson, and his email's on there. But feel free to reach out to him if you're interested in attending any of these upcoming events. We will be planning other seminar series like today. And so if you would just look for the Friday announcements that come out, if you're already an I-SCORE-RC member, you should be getting those. And that will tell you when our next seminar series is going to be. Last thing I want to leave you with, if you scan the QR code there, you can register to become an I-SCORE-RC member. If you haven't done so yet, I highly encourage you to. This will put you on the listserv for e-news when those start coming out. You'll also be able to then see when other upcoming events and things are going to happen and be able to register for those. So I encourage you to do that right now if you're not an I-SCORE-RC member yet.
Did I recall you saying that if you're a preceptor, you're automatically joined as a member?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I thought at one point you had said that if you were a preceptor or enrolled, you would be automatically enrolled.
That is, I think we did probably say that. Yes, you would definitely be already considered an I-SCORE-RC member.
Okay.
Yep. So I don't